World War II profoundly altered Vietnam's political landscape. Though often overshadowed by battles elsewhere in the Pacific and Europe, the war years in Vietnam were a turning point, marking the collapse of colonial control, the suffering of ordinary people, and the emergence of revolutionary movements. It was during World War II that the foundations of Vietnam's future independence struggle were laid. Colonial rule before the war. Before World War II, Vietnam was part of French Indochina, a colonial federation that also included Laos and Cambodia. Under French rule, the Vietnamese were subjected to economic exploitation, political repression, and cultural assimilation. Resistance movements had already emerged in the early 20th century, but they were fragmented and brutally suppressed. Japanese occupation and the Vichy French. When Nazi Germany defeated France in 1940, the new Vichy regime collaborated with Axis powers. Japan quickly seized this opportunity. Rather than launching a full-scale invasion, the Japanese negotiated with the Vichy French, allowing them to retain administrative control over Indochina while Japan stationed troops there. From 1940 to 1945, Vietnam was under a dual occupation, nominally ruled by the French but effectively controlled by the Japanese. This uneasy arrangement allowed Japan to extract resources and use Vietnam as a strategic base for its campaigns in Southeast Asia. Economic exploitation and famine. During the occupation, the Vietnamese people endured extreme hardship. Japan and the Vichy French extracted rice and rubber for the war effort. Food exports increased even as local supplies dwindled, and transportation systems were disrupted by Allied bombings and mismanagement. The result was the Great Famine of 1945 in northern Vietnam, which killed between 400,000 and 2 million people. Hunger, disease, and forced labor devastated rural communities. This humanitarian catastrophe further eroded any remaining legitimacy of colonial or Japanese rule and fueled popular anger. Rise of the Viet Minh. Amidst the chaos, resistance movements grew stronger. In 1941, Ho Chi Minh, a seasoned revolutionary who had spent years abroad, returned to Vietnam. In a cave in northern Vietnam, he founded the Viet Minh League for the Independence of Vietnam, a nationalist and communist-led coalition aimed at resisting Japanese and French rule. The Viet Minh quickly expanded its influence in rural areas, building a network of guerrilla fighters, local administrators, and sympathizers. They also received limited support from the Allies, especially the American Office of Strategic Services (OSS), which provided training and arms to help resist the Japanese. The collapse of colonial authority. In March 1945, sensing that Germany was near defeat and fearing an Allied invasion, Japan overthrew the Vichy French administration in a coup and declared Vietnam independent under Emperor Bao Dai. In reality, this was a puppet regime with no real power. Just 5 months later, in August 1945, Japan surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This left a sudden power vacuum in Vietnam, with no clear authority and chaos across the country. The August Revolution. Seizing the moment, the Viet Minh launched the August Revolution. In a remarkably swift campaign, they took control of Hanoi, Saigon, and most provincial capitals. On September 2, 1945, Ho Chi Minh stood before a massive crowd in Hanoi and declared the independence of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. However, the celebrations were short-lived. The Allies, particularly France and Britain, moved quickly to re-establish colonial control. French forces returned, setting the stage for the First Indochina War, 1946 to 1954, in which the Viet Minh would fight for full independence. Legacy of World War II in Vietnam. World War II was a catalyst for revolutionary change in Vietnam. Its major legacies include collapse of colonial legitimacy. The war exposed the weakness of French rule and the duplicity of Japanese liberation. Emergence of nationalist leadership. Ho Chi Minh and the Viet Minh emerged as the dominant force in Vietnamese politics. Mass mobilization. The famine and hardship radicalized the population and drove mass support for independence. End of imperial illusions. The myth of European invincibility was shattered, giving hope to anti-colonial movements across Asia. Vietnam's experience in World War II was marked by occupation, suffering, and the birth of a national revolution. The end of the war did not bring peace but instead opened a new chapter in Vietnam's struggle for independence. The events of 1939 to 1945 were not merely a footnote in the global war, they were the beginning of a decades-long fight that would reshape Vietnam and the world.